Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we explore the future and what this means for your leadership. We ask the big questions. What's happening on the horizon? What does this mean for us? And most importantly, what skills do I need now for leadership of the future? It's time to explore. Let's go.
Hey there, it's Zoe, and welcome to the solosode that is about wrapping up this season, which has been about leading culture, specifically meta-modern leadership. And to be honest, I think that term is not that useful. It sounds very woke, quite frankly, and I think more importantly is to think about how can we be more compassionate, how can we be more inclusive in our leadership thinking, and how can we navigate diversity, complexity, and ambiguity better. That would be the better subtitle, I think, for this season. So I'd like to toss out the word meta-modern for its wankiness and move on. This is all about leading people, folks, and leading people into the future. And that can be challenging. So the title for this particular episode is Stretch Your Thinking to Lead the Future. I've done a series of little YouTube clips on this topic for this month, so you can go ahead, go to my YouTube channel. We'll put a link in the show notes where you can have a quick look at these 1 minute or less videos. Yes, I am striving to be more brief. I'm sure I could have said that more eloquently on video. So there you go. New playlist that you can find on the YouTube channel. So this last quarter this last section we've had since I last gave you a solosode, we've had Sam Slade, who was talking about basically going flat in your hierarchy. She calls it going horizontal, and using collective decision making, which was a pretty amazing interview. And her book is really practical and pragmatic resource for those of us who want to do a bit more collective decision making and move away from hierarchy and command and control. So that was a really cool one. Brett King, God, that man is smart. It's hard to keep up with him. I love his show, The Futurist, that he co-hosts with Robert Tercek. That was really cool to interview him. And I love his book, of course, Techno-Socialism. I think that's a really powerful book. And then the wonderful Danny Brissell, which was all about reading. And of course, as an avid reader, big fan. So let's try and pull together some ideas that are useful to you so that you can scribble down and move forward. Scribble down, what does that mean? You mean hunker down and accelerate your leadership thinking and your ability to contend with what's coming. Before we get into the detail of that, a few personal updates for you. I am now running without pain. Why do I include these little personal updates? Yes, it's to build some sort of rapport with you so you get to know me as a human. And I think leadership is like that, right? It's about the big picture thinking, the big horizons, going way out there in terms of what is meaning, what is purposeful, what is impactful. And it's also about contending with the very small, tiny world in front of us. And in some cases, that is about the pain that we have or the joys that we have in the daily lives that we experience. And so that's part of it. And I was thinking about this as I'm writing Terra Blanca. And one of the scenes I'm sure I'm going to put in there is about one of the characters having an injury to her finger. There's a whole revolution going on. No spoilers. And she's got a pain in her finger. And that's inspired a little bit by the splinter I got in my finger just recently, which wouldn't come out and got infected. Why is that even important? Because these tiny things divert our attention and focus from the really big picture. And as leaders, we've got to manage both those things. We've got to manage the here and now and the tiny and the what seems like nonsensical and superfluous issues of our own personal worlds and those of our team around us. And we've got to contend with what's next. So when I tell you I'm running without pain, that means I have been liberated by a lot of space that was happening in my brain to manage all of that. So hurrah. Plus, I'm losing a bit of weight, which is yay, because I put on some weight sitting around the house when I couldn't run. So that is very exciting. I'm feeling healthy, fit, strong. Hurrah! And yes, that is leading to better writing. And the update on the book, Terra Blanca, the prequel, it is going back to the editor by the end of this week. I've made a commitment to that. I'm almost done. Yes, it has been a labor. And a joyous one. So that'll be in your hot little hands in due course. No promises. And we're also going to have a cover reveal. I've got the cover back from the designer too, which is pretty cool. So if you're on my bookish list, you can sign up for that at my website, zoerouth.com. Click on books. You'll find bookish as one of the tabs there. And you can sign up to get the occasional briefing newsletter from me about my writing, the books I'm reading, the books I recommend. So if you're like a book nut and you want to be across my writing, whether it's my fiction work and eventually another nonfiction piece of work, not sure when that's coming, maybe next year, then you can sign up for bookish. So for some other updates, and one of our listeners, Joe, I know it's you, I know you're listening to this, suggested that I might share other aspects of my life and work apart from my writing, which seems to be a distraction. It is absolutely not a distraction. It is a passion and it feeds my work. And she's right. I don't talk about all the other amazing, passionate pieces of work that I do that are useful for people to know about. This week I'm heading to Orange. Yay! I love the fact that there is a town called Orange. It just makes me happy to think about that because oranges are a happy color and a happy fruit. And so Orange is a happy town. It's a beautiful little town in rural New South Wales. And I'm heading there to do strategic thinking training with a New South Wales government department. And I'm so excited about this. Any opportunity to help people think bigger and better about their world of work is a huge opportunity for me. I'm excited by that. To liberate these brains and to help problem solve into the future is awesome. So I love doing strategic thinking training, and yes, I get to do that this week, which is awesome. And in other upcoming events, I will also be speaking at the Local Government Professionals annual conference in Melbourne on the 25th of May. So if that's you and you're going to that, please come and say hello. I love meeting listeners to the show. I love hearing what you enjoy, any suggestions you have, anybody you want to introduce me to for potential guests. That would be terrific. All right, so those are all the personal/professional updates. The other thing that happened last week is we ran our Fit for the Future, how to boost the strategic ability of your team. And this really hit a few buttons. We sold out the Canberra-based workshop, the face-to-face workshop, and really maxed out on the webinar. I had to upgrade my Zoom account to handle all the registrations. It was pretty amazing. And on reflection about that, I'm like, why? Why is this particular topic so hot right now, as they say? I think, or I know, it's because business as usual isn't cutting it anymore. We are facing huge amounts of uncertainty. We are facing down recession, rising inflation rates, you name it. And all that makes people a little anxious. Anything we can do to find a little bit of certainty is useful. Strategic thinking doesn't give us certainty necessarily. It gives us structure in which we can step forward with courage. And I think that is the most useful aspect of strategic thinking. It doesn't give us all the answers because we don't crystal ball, in fact. I just had to have a sip of my tea. It's turning cold. Just note to self, drinking tea while delivering a solosode does not work. It goes cold. So why else is this such an important topic? Because one brain is not enough. So if you're a leader and you have a team and you think you're meant to come up with all the ideas, bow, you will be struggling. And I think a lot of leaders are coming to grips with that, is that they don't need to come up with all the solutions. In fact, it is so much better when everybody else is thinking big picture. And that's one of the big whinges I hear, or complaints or challenges I hear from leaders, is that they just want their executive team to think more strategically, get their heads out of their silos. Why are their heads in their silos? Well, there's a number of different reasons for that. Because that's where their deliverables are, that's where they're accountable to and for, that's where their compensation is often tied. So asking someone who has all those things going on to put their head above the parapet and think whole of organization is basically working against a structure of work that is set to fail. And it's like getting blood out of a stone, right? So people will prioritize the things for which they are accountable and need to deliver on first. So there's a systemic issue that needs to be resolved before we teach anybody the strategic thinking skills. Both those pieces of work are really important. So I think those are a couple of some of the reasons why people don't do the strategic thinking work across leadership teams. There's also an aspect of how is the culture? Is it safe to think strategically? Is it safe to share your ideas? Is it safe to speak up? Is it safe to challenge the status quo? And quite often, these people stuff challenges are the real root of the problem of why the leaders are not thinking strategically. So there's a structural issue that could be challenging the ability to think strategically, and quite likely also a cultural one. And both these things are hard. So get used to it, leader. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable is what we need to lean into. So one of the mantras I shared on the workshop and on the webcast of Fit for the Future is explore, map, adapt. And I've shared it previously on the podcast, and I think it's a really useful one. Explore, map, adapt. Explore, map, adapt. It's a great little chant. And yes, I make the audience dance to that, which is very fun. Some of you are rolling your eyes and going, oh my God. And yes, that should be you, dancing in your chair right now. Explore, map, adapt. The mindset of an explorer is critical. We need to be curious. Otherwise, there's no hope. There's no hope of embracing what the future holds, because it is so easy to get overwhelmed and to bury our heads and to revert to business as usual and silos. So having a curiosity mindset, an explorer's mindset, is essential. The second piece, mapping. This is such an important tip for you. I think you should, stop the car, stop your workout, make a note of this. Make visible your problems and possibilities. Mapping is so underrated and so underutilized or underused by leaders. What I mean by that is, if you've got a problem that you're contending with, draw it out. Use a diagram. Use a model to sketch it out. Or if you want to shape possibilities on a particular event or trend, map it out. So when in doubt, map it out. There you go. You got a new mantra. When in doubt, map it out. This is awesome. This is like a great dress rehearsal for the keynote I've got coming up. When in doubt, map it out. The adapting piece is when we have embraced our curiosity mindset, mapped out the problems and the possibilities, and then implement. So we are learning and we are growing and we are leaning into this. How do we actually adapt? Underneath that, there's three critical attributes. We need compassion. In this world of diversity and opportunity, we need to be able to be compassionate with the people that we want to take along the journey. And we need to be compassionate for ourselves, to be honest, because leadership is freaking hard. The second aspect is collaboration. So once we get to know ourselves and the people around us with compassion and in curiosity also, we can learn how to collaborate. And one of the ways that we can learn how to collaborate is map the dynamics of the team. It's called a sociometry. It's one of my favorite skills, and basically means mind map the relationships. And in that, you can start to see where the problems and the possibilities are for building better relationships and leveraging the abilities of the team around you. Another map you can throw into the mix is mapping out the talents, skills, and experience of the people on your team. Not just the experience and skills in relation to the job at hand, but everything they bring to the table. What do they know how to do in their personal lives? Maybe they coach their son's local soccer team, and so they have coaching skills. They have organization skills. Or maybe Susan is a knife maker on the weekend, and she knows how to weld and to build and to create things. That skill of creativity and of discipline and of detail, because you need to have an attention to detail to produce a piece of art like a handcrafted knife, can lend itself to other particular projects. And in doing this, in mapping out these skills and experiences of your team, you will not only come to know them better as people, you will then have a whole wealth of perspectives and abilities to lean on for what comes next, which is creativity. Yes. So pull out your finger paints and no. Creativity is not about colored pens or painting or anything frivolous. like that. Creativity is not a frivolous thing. It is a discipline, and it's a way of liberating thinking by providing constraints, by using parameters and boundaries to shape and tease out new ideas. It is very powerful methodology. And there's plenty of creative thinking tools that you can use. Would you like one? It's called brainstorming. Yes, roll your eyes indeed. Brainstorming is underrated and badly used. One of the key tips you can do right now to upgrade your brainstorming is ask people to brainstorm 3 things. That's it. Just give them 3 things. Do it in silence first. That's the next tip. And then have them share their ideas so they can percolate and make connections between the ideas. Go silent again for a minute. Ask them to come up with 3 more things. And there you go. And they share it back. The connections are there. The connections start to build on one another. That is more productive brainstorming. There's plenty of others. That's one you can work with immediately. I think this skill of facilitating team meetings is also underused and underperformed by leaders. And it is one of our mainstay responsibilities to be able to host and facilitate our team members into better strategic thinking. So you might need to upgrade your facilitation skills along the way. All right, now we're coming to what I call the uncomfortable part of the podcast. I was writing notes for this. I'm like, should I talk about this? Should I not talk about this? Well, darn it. I think I've got to lean into what I suggest myself is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And the topic I want to talk about, which is a dot point under stretch your thinking to lead the future, is about the coronation, colonization, and healing. Yeah. Okay. So we're going big. It was the Coronation on the weekend as I record this. And it's interesting to canvass people's opinions about it, which is what the ABC did here in Australia. As they're showing all the preview material for the Coronation, they had commentary from various people about what it meant, why they liked it, didn't like it, what it meant for them. And it's very diverse, no doubt. Here are some particular perspectives that you may be familiar with, and one of them may be your own, is that, this is my brother's actually, I'll share this, he won't mind me sharing this. He goes, I said, Alex, did you watch the Coronation? He said, nah, it's just, they put a hat on a king, big deal. I'm like, yes, that is absolutely one perspective. It is just a ceremony where they put a very expensive hat on a very aging human who has the title of king. That is one perspective. Another perspective by Stan Grant, if you read his articles in the ABC, is that this is like ripping off a raw wound and is the hallmark of colonization and all the despair and tragedy that happened to the first people of Australia and indeed of humans around the world where the British showed up to colonize. Colonization has had a lot of impact, both horrendous and possibly hopeful. And this is a different perspective. What has been hopeful about colonization? Well, one could argue, another perspective, is that colonization brought education, democracy, and industry. Yeah, some good, some bad in all of that. I don't think we can say good, bad, yes, no to all of this. We can look at something like the Coronation and go, what could this mean? And I think that is the phrasing of the question that we should explore, as opposed to what does this mean? Because when we say what does this mean, it means the assumption in the question is that there is one meaning to this event that happened in England. There's other ideas that circulate around the whole idea of crowning a king of England, which at the moment is still legally the king of Australia. What does it mean? What could it mean? The whole idea of kingship is weird in a contemporary society, isn't it? That leadership is inherited due to your biology. That didn't actually really work out all that well across English history anyway. And I am an avid reader of historical fiction and history of English monarchy. I don't know why. Well, I do actually know why. When I was a teenager, and as teenagers do, fumbling around trying to figure out your identity, as a kid whose mom was half English, half Canadian, and whose dad was British, this is what I could latch onto in terms of figuring out my identity. And when you're trying to figure out your identity, you look for the good bits, right? And especially as a teenager. So I was looking for the good bits of what it means to be English and got all excited about cool English things. And it's cool, this is my teenage brain now talking, to have a king and a queen and the whole royalty thing. And I fell in love with the idea of princesses and royalty and all that kind of pie in the sky stuff, really. And didn't know anything about slavery, colonization, and how they built their wealth through oppression of others. It hasn't always been a good thing. And inherited leadership, you had one good king who was very productive and useful and made a great contribution to the realm, made some good laws, did good things with taxation, followed by their son, usually, who stuffed it up. Was a terrible leader. And you could see this in King Henry VIII. I mean, oh my goodness, King Henry VIII. Yeah, 6 wives. He had a few of them had their heads removed at his whim. He set up the Church of England, took it away from the Pope and the Roman Catholics, established the Protestant faith across England. And then he left it all to his son, who died quickly, and then Bloody Mary, his daughter, who had tried to reverse a lot of that and had a lot of the Protestants killed, which is why she was called Bloody Mary. Anyway, I don't want to go into a long segue into the history of the English monarchy, which is interesting. Let's put it that way. So the idea of kingship, inherited leadership, is not a useful principle for us now. So what is good? What could there be good left in kingship and the whole idea of a monarchy? And this befuddles people. I have to admit that the pomp gave me moments of awe. Like the splendor of the chapel of Westminster Abbey is incredible. The singing of the choir was remarkable. The idea that a human would dedicate their lives in service of a nation and taking a private oath and blessing from an archbishop, I found quite moving, even though I don't have a religion myself, was pretty moving. I found aspects of it pretty moving and befuddling, to be honest. I'm like, how do these upper class white people get to have all this pomp and ceremony built around them? Why do we celebrate 2 humans in this way? How does this come to be? And what could this mean? Well, so there's lots of questions and conversations and stories that we can weave around this whole idea of coronation, history, etc. And all of these truths form a tapestry. We can't just look at one thread. We can't look at the glory and the majesty, and we can't just look at the travesty as well. We need to see all of them. And this is the challenge as leaders. We need to try and see as much of the tapestry as we can to find the stories, the perspectives that may contradict the ones that we prefer or that feel more comfortable to us, so that we can have a better view. And then what? And this is the leadership challenge here. We need to pull on the threads of that tapestry that we find most useful to weave something new. And this is the hopeful part of the conversation, I'm hoping, around coronation, colonization, and healing. So if we look at Charles III, there are 2 threads of hope in the whole thing. He has acknowledged the pain and suffering of slavery and the responsibility of his own history, his own family history. And this is quite a big shift when it comes to white Anglo-Saxon perspective on heritage. It's not something that white Anglo-Saxons have necessarily done. They've taken all the inherited divine right of kings thing and held on to that. Responsibility, amends, not so much. And I think this is a hopeful piece. And the other hopeful piece I saw in the coronation is that he invited leaders of all faiths of the realm of England and the United Kingdom to be present at his coronation. And it was embracing people of all faith, not just the faith of the Church of England, for which he is now leader. These 2 threads, I think, are useful threads to pull on to start to weave something new. Why do I say that? Because all leadership development, all leadership maturity comes with seeing first our shadow, an acknowledgement of it, that it exists, and that we can heal with that. So when we deny our shadow, when we say that wasn't us, that wasn't our history, then we don't allow our ability to lean into that and go, this is part of us, this is part of our history, this is part of who we are and who we have been. Until we do that acknowledgement, we can't actually, unplug the charge of it. By suppressing it, it becomes always a temptation that will lean back towards these oppressive ways of being. And I'm talking as a species, I'm talking as a culture. So when we stare down the horror and challenges of our past, we can start to heal, to make something useful of it, to think never again, to think what now, what next, how can we be of service and of assistance? And that's how we can lead forward into the future. So until we do that, we can't lead forward. So these are the hopeful threads I pull from the tapestry that is the conversation of the coronation. And I'm hopeful of what it could mean. And in that pulling of those threads, I'm hoping other threads will be pulled, especially here in Australia, that when we start to talk about the voice to Parliament and giving the first peoples of this country a legitimate and acknowledged voice in our Constitution and our constitutional process will help to start to weave a better tapestry for the future. One of the aspects of this conversation around the voice has been about, it sounds like a racist principle, and I think that is actually incorrect. Why do I think it's incorrect? Because Aboriginal Torres Strait people have had nations here before any colonialists arrived. They had a way of being, a way of organizing, a way of leading, a way of governing that was part of a whole institution, not in the way that we think of institutions in a Western way. It was embedded in the practice of how they managed to live and thrive on this land for 60,000 years. And I did have a little giggle when they talked to the Coronation about, this is 1,000 years of history. I'm like, compare that to 60,000 years, and it's just a little blink of an eye. And yet, 1,000 years of history is something. It is not nothing. All of these truths exist in our tapestry. So as we look forward to the future, how can we weave the conversation into bringing more voices to the table, bringing more perspectives to the table, so that together we can create something better than what we have lived through? So those are my threads of hope that I'm seeing in the world around us. Now, I would love to hear your perspective. No doubt you have a very strong opinion on much of this, and that is all really helpful for all of us to hear and understand and to tease out. None of us have all the answers, and more questions we have, we might find some answers that will help all of us. Right. So now what? Now what is explore the perspectives you find uncomfortable. Seek them out instead of disparaging them because you find them awkward. And I talked about this a lot through the American election in 2020, when there was such a volatility around the conversation. Whichever candidates you supported, whichever spectrum you found yourself on in the political divide, is to park your own favorite story and to lean into the stories of others to understand where they came. And we did a lot of interviews with people to explore perspective. One of my favorites, of course, is Buster Benson and his book, Why Are We Yelling? It might be useful to go back and listen to that episode if you want to discover a little bit of how to navigate polarized conversation. So there's a lot of cool stuff coming up on the podcast. We are shifting into a new season, and the topic is leading change, and particularly exploring virtues, ethics, and character. And the first interviewees coming up are Rohit Bhargava, and he is the co-author of Future Normal, one of the books I highly recommend that we dive into. It's a really good book. It looks at all the trends that are happening around us, and there's some amazing intel in that book. And it also gives a playlist for whatever sector you're in of all the trends that you should probably be on top of, and some great case studies as well. Plus, each chapter is followed up with some useful leadership questions. So yeah, thanks Rohit. He's coming up next week. We've got Iman Kibuku. I can't believe I just missaid it. Iman Kibuku-Masoki. She is my niece, heads up. I'll just lay it out there. She is the younger sister to Jordan Kibuku-Masoki, who was on the show last year, I think it was. So we're getting a Gen Z perspective on leadership and the workplace, and it is enlightening. And the other one coming up that I think you'll enjoy is Kamalesh Lardi, who is a fabulous digital transformation expert. And we have a wonderful conversation about how to approach the digital transformation that is required for every organization if we are going to thrive in what's next. So that's the show for today. I would love your thoughts. I hope it pushed some buttons. I told you it would be uncomfortable. I hope you find something useful in exploring a new way of thinking and seeing the world. I would love to hear from you. Feel free to email me, zoe@zoerouth.com, or find me on any of the socials. Or, yeah, that's pretty much it. You can find me. You know where to find me. It would be awesome. Rate or review the podcast. Share this episode. Share any of the episodes. It's how the word gets out. And the podcast continues to go from strength to strength. And that's due to your listenership and support. So thank you very much. In the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast. To find out more about leadership of the future or to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.